And welcome to Welcoming New Vermonters session. My name is Beth Awhaitey. I'm an entrepreneur, a community member, a Vermonter, a child of immigrants, a world traveler, a proud alumni of UVM, AmeriCorps, and Kobe Sawyer, just like Mohammed Jafar. And I will be the moderator for this session. We have 4 great panelists here who will introduce themselves. Tino Tenda Rutanhara, can you please introduce yourself?
Oops, sorry. Hey, everybody. My name is Tino Tenda Rutanhara, and I am the co-founder and chair of the board of the Vermont Professionals of Color Network. I am originally from Zimbabwe, and I have been in the United States for almost approximately 20 years now. And I work full-time at dealer.com. So those of you who frequent Pine Street will probably know all about dealer.com. And I'm delighted to be part of this panel and looking forward to having a fruitful conversation.
Wonderful, thank you. Noel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Noel Mukhiza. I am originally from Burundi, and I'm in the United States since 2007. And currently, I am working full-time with the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants that many people know as Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program. I came as an immigrant myself, as a refugee the past 13 years, and I'm a program coordinator within this agency. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Noel. Chol?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chol Dorr, and originally from South Sudan. I've been here for 13 years. And I ran a nonprofit called the Sudanese Foundation of Vermont. It was founded in 2016. I'm also a part of the amazing team with my good friend, Mohammed Jafar, as a member of New American Advisory Council. So that's all about me for now, and I can't wait to hear from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chol. And Mohammed?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mohammed Jafar. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Vermont Council on Rural Development, and all of you as well, my good friends, for being here. I am representing VNAC, Vermont New American Advisory Council, whom Chol just mentioned. I currently am working for the city of Burlington as a pretrial services coordinator in the Chittenden County Courts. Originally from Kenya, I've been here since I was about 7 years old, so a little over 17 years that I've been in the United States, and glad to be here, and glad, I have the folks that are here with me.
Thank you, Noel, Mohammed, Tino, and Chol. I'd like to get started by addressing point 2 in the Vermont Council on Rural Development's proposition on Vermont combating racism, celebrating our diversity today, and welcoming new Vermonters of color. And for those of you who are attending, you're welcome to follow along with this proposition onto the websites. And it reads, we need to advance a culture of inclusiveness and equity today and recognize the diversity of people who call Vermont home in public policy, in our communities, and in our hearts. We need to reach out to promote belonging and welcome newcomers to Vermont, especially people of color, as Vermonters on day one. This can be a foundation for the creative renewal of our economy and communities for the future. So I'd like to start the conversation with really discussing why Vermont, why now? A lot of you from the panelists and attendees probably come from different areas of the country or in Vermont. And what does welcoming new Vermonters really mean for any of you? Don't all jump in at once. Mohammed, it looks like you're ready to speak.
All right, I'll go first. let's see, I was very young when my family resettled in the United States and specifically in Vermont. But to me, being welcoming to new Americans means using the resources that we have, which I don't like to believe that there aren't resources, but using the resources that we have to pave a way for new Americans and their independence. Specifically, independence, I think, is the most important thing. And I think that should be a goal for new Americans and new Vermonters that come to our state on day one, really creating the structure that they need to find the education immediately, the job education, the supports via school and everything else that they need. I think going right from day one is the most important thing, and that promotes independence, which I have personally felt and my family has felt has been one of the most important things in integrating into Vermont.
You make an excellent point, as in the proposition it addresses welcoming new Vermonters, people of color, on day one, which is very essential. And it also addresses, welcoming Vermonters in a strategic way where declining birth rates in Vermont, having the median age of Vermonters be 43, which is, I believe, among the top 5 in the state, in the US. What does that mean for people of color? As for people of color, it's younger. So how can we attract people of color into Vermont, and not only from other countries, but from other states? How can we retain people of color, professionals of color as well? What are some of the population challenges we have with youth? Me in particular, with my family, I know a lot of my youth in my family who grew up in Vermont do not want to stay here. What are some of the things that we can do to make it more inclusive and more attractive to our youth to come back to Vermont if they leave, and to contribute to their community as well? And so you address some of that too. Tino, did you want to add on?
Sure. So I think part of the problem that we have in Vermont might be our marketing problem. We do not do a very good job of promoting Vermont as a destination. A lot of times we use the words like, it is so cold here. And when I say we, I'm talking black, white, brown, it doesn't matter. Everybody in Vermont is guilty of this. You got to get over the winters. It is very white here. It's, very small, et cetera, which all creates a negative stereotype of the state, which is why I say it's a bit of a marketing problem. I think what we need to do as a state is to promote the state to be something positive. So I think a lot of times, of the same reasons why you get young white couples moving from Boston, moving from Philly, moving from New York to come and live here, they uproot their young families to come and live here, is because it's a great place to raise kids. It's safe. It's got really good schools. It's you've got the great outdoors, all the cool things that everybody talks about Vermont. As people of color and as people that are looking to try and attract BIPOC individuals and professionals to the state, we need to also look at that and think, well, why wouldn't a young 30-year-old dad and a 29-year-old mom with their 2 kids not want to come live in Vermont just because they're black or brown? They also are looking for good schools. They also are looking for good places to raise their kids. They also want to have a nice outdoor space and clean air, etc. So I think we do a disservice to the state when we do not go and look for people that, or at least market the state as a destination for people beyond just young white couples coming to live here. Because I think the same reasons that those young white couples who want to come live here are the same reasons that you do have young black couples, young brown couples coming to live here as well.
That's a great point. While I think it will be extremely difficult to change the weather in Vermont, there's definitely a way you can market it with some skiing and snowboarding and other fun activities that we love to do here.
Just to throw that in there, I've taken up skiing, and yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. Like, you can learn to ski no matter what color you are, and so why shouldn't we try and make Vermont attractive to people that are not white. Just because they don't ski doesn't mean that they cannot ski once they've been here after 5 years or something, and they decide that they want to start exploring the great outdoors.
Absolutely, absolutely. Noel, Chor, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add something. I wanted to say, yes, adding to everybody's comments, I think this is great. I would like also to add that it would be great to create a space, an environment that is more welcoming, that is, like my friend just said, attractive. I'm talking about things like, you know, a more affordable place where people could feel like, you know, life works here. If I have a job, can my job really sustain me, right? Instead of doing 2 shifts, 3 shifts like that, just have a job that you feel like you like and it helps you and it can really promote your life. So I think that creating that kind of environment and a space, I think that would really attract a lot of young people and Vermonters who are leaving the state.
Absolutely. Affordability has a lot to do with attracting new Vermonters.
So first, before I started on this topic, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Vermont Council on Rural Development and to you, Beth, for you know, finding the time to host this this forum. I think part of community engagement is actually listening to stories, right? People that have been here, listening to their stories and what do they have to say, right? And what else can policymakers, what else can businesses learn from this kind of stories really to shape their workplace? Now, with respect to the, I think the first question that you asked was very timely. You know, what do we need to do really to welcome new immigrant to this state, right? For me, there are a couple of things. One is that we have to do a good job with the people that are already here, right? And we also have to understand that
Oh, you may have froze on us. So.
Right. They are coming.
Continue. Sorry, might have just been on my side. I apologize.
They're coming to this state and literally starting from zero. They're starting over from zero, right? And when they come here, they have no other second home other than this state, right? And what that means is we as a state, the people that are already here, have a responsibility to line up resources, right? To really help them to settle, right? Because it's a big move from a refugee camp to America in this state. You know, that's unbelievable change, right? The cultural shock, people don't know what to do. People don't know what kind of resources do we have. So until we do that, until we can accomplish that goal, it would be incredibly hard to welcome, to even begin about talking about welcoming new people. Now, what do the state need to do? Really, a couple of things. One is that it's not the same as in before 1970s when the Vietnamese came here, right? Right now, we have almost all representatives from different communities, and that means we can make resources available to these communities that are already here. So when people come to this state, they can actually use the same resources to help their fellow Neo-American to actually settle here and succeed. I think using people to help people is the most powerful thing. And I think that is where we really need to do a good job. I see a lot of good programmings at different businesses, at different organizations, but we are not using people enough to actually do that community engagement, to extend the good work you're doing as a company to the community, right? You're doing a good job, and that good job remain in the company. The engagement piece is just missing. And that come down to using people. Now, how do you attract people to come to this state? The best ambassadors of our state are us, right? Is Mohammed, Jafar, is Noel, right? If we think that it's very expensive to live here in this state, if we think that you need 2 jobs really to live in this state, just talking to someone in Ohio, that scares someone into come over here, right? And let's think about someone who have not gone to school, who will face incredible amount of challenges to actually move to this state, right? So before we even talk about, let's bring people of color from other states to here, right? Let's actually use people here in this state to be the ambassadors of this state and say, here are the good things. You're coming to raise a family. Here's the great opportunity here. You'll find this town very beautiful. It will be good for you, for your kids, and for your family. If we do not have that kind of story, which come down to routine, marketing, then we are not sending a good message. And if we do a good job of doing that marketing, and someone come here and actually leave within 1 year, then we've not, our marketing need to be redone again, right? So that's just my take on those few things that, but that's just my view. I think we definitely need to do a good job on those fronts.
No, that's excellent. And I want to lean into a bit of what you're mentioning, Chol, on the engagement piece, and discuss a little bit about how have the ways we've welcomed new Vermonters changed in the past 5 years? What are things that have changed, and what do you predict may happen in the next 5 to 10 years on how we welcome new Vermonters? And before we lean into that conversation, I do want to mention for all of the attendees, you are more than welcome to ask questions. I encourage you to put questions into the question box. It may look different for me, but in the Q&A section on the bottom of that strip there, please ask any questions, and I hope to get to them at some point during the conversation. So getting back to what has changed in the past 5 years, and what do you think you predict may happen within the next 5 to 10 years?
I may get us started a little bit and talk about a little bit about, the climate, the politics, and the numbers. Sometimes in the resettlement, we talk about how many people are coming, but again, we don't like to cap on the people. We want to say the numbers, but the people who are coming, these are lives that are being, changed. So in the past 4 years, let me start with the past 4 years. I know many of us have noticed that the numbers have really gone down in terms of reception and placement of welcoming refugees and asylees. And this is due to difference in, I think, policies in the administration. I would say differences of administrations. So, but as you know, before that, in the Obama era, the numbers were kept a little higher. I would say, for example, in fiscal year 16, for example, we did nationally, there was a projection of 85,000, and of whom 84, close to that number actually, 84,900 people arrived. In Vermont, we did project to receive 350, and we end up actually going beyond that number. We did 386. But can you imagine that after that, in 2000, FY17, the projection that the last administration, let's say the Obama administration had brought forth was 100,000. And in terms of people who actually arrived, because that's the year when the administration changed, it was actually really decreased, slashed, I would say, 32,000 people arrived. So from that moment on, things changed dramatically. So until last year, actually FY20, the projection was 18,000, and only 9,770 something people arrived in Vermont. Guess what? We received 23 people. So we declined so much. So this has to do with the administration, I would say, and also the fact that, if these kind of things happen, the infrastructure in place to receive refugees and the communities are really get impacted in one way or the other. So I would say in our agency itself, we saw ourselves dwindling, and the number of employees, being cut or slashed in numbers. So now we are talking about FY21, where the new administration is coming, and the cap being 62,500 as of May 3rd. So which means there is a hope that we might be getting more people coming to the state. But the problem is, do we have infrastructure to accommodate any surge in numbers? So that's something that is out of debate. But I want to say that the state and the communities have been really welcoming. They, in terms of, putting the resources together to welcome, at least in that phase of welcoming refugees. But again, I think we need more policies towards long-term integration of our resettled immigrants and refugees. Thank you.
And if I can add, is that welcoming of new American to this community, to our state, is a great story, right? Before in 10 years ago, and I'm sure it's still going on, you have incredible Vermonters, right, who are welcoming strangers to their community, to their house, right? And they are building strong relationships that lasted after today, right? And they hosted them for 2 weeks. That's a huge commitment. They're taking them to shopping. They're assigning their kids at schools. They're taking them to the hospitals. They're helping them to drive. They're teaching them how to drive. And they're really educating them about the resources that are available, right? What we should be thinking as a state right now is, how is that kind of hospitality impacted right now, right? And what do we have in place of that, right? At this time, if we bring somebody here, I don't expect, it's likely that someone will welcome someone to live with them for 2 weeks or more, or to meet with them constantly to help them out, right? But at this time, I think what the state can do, if we are really in this transition to welcome more people, is this is what we've been doing in the last few years. It's working. Personally, I believe this is one of the best program ever, using communities that have been here for some time to host these families, tell them what to do, how to live here, the people that are here, right? If we do more of that, there are two good things about it. One, they build a lasting relationship, right? And that person become the point person that if they need help anytime, they go to that person, right? So we live now in a time where everything is expensive. Every year, the cost of living is rising and rising and rising. My view is that can we create a program, right? Can we create a program where now we have, if someone is coming from a Somali community, right, or a Somali Bantu community, for example, we should be able to pay someone in the Somali community for that period of time to host this family, right? Because if we do that, we're also helping empowering people to help their own people, and that's it. Come down to again using people to help people, right? And I just don't know whether I mean, there are resources. I'm sure Noel can say this later, that there is a support system that can help people to stay for at least up to 3 months, and after that they really have to pick up for themselves, right? Can a state step in some ways to really help the people that are coming from this place, right? If we have that kind of system, I think it is one way to really establish people to here. If you can change people's experience the first time when they arrive here, they are more likely to live longer here, right? But if they have hard time, coming in, it's hard time, they've been struggling from the first day up to now, they are not going to live here. They're just going to move to another place. So we create more opportunities around that. I think it would be a great starting point to welcome new people to our state.
If I could jump in, how has the way we welcome new Americans or new Vermonters changed in the past 5 years? Specifically from outside of the country, obviously, as Noel mentioned, the just changes in policy and politics, and obviously a very sharp decrease in the number of folks that were admitted into the US and into Vermont. And what do I think will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? I think that will change a little bit. I like to think that I'm optimistic and hopeful that the generation that is right now, the generation that is growing in Vermont, will be able to move us forward in kind of seeing an immigration system that really does work, and that does allow for the support that folks need once they get here as well. And to touch up on that point, I think one thing that is often overlooked is the support that parents can get about the culture that they are about to jump into. I think that's one of the least discussed things in any situation when we talk about new Americans, is the amount of support parents need in understanding the new culture that they're about to raise children in. I can remember things that to you and to us might not seem like a big deal, like sleepovers being something that was incredibly controversial in my house and with my parents, right? And just explaining some of those different things, what college means, what it means to, after spending years of your life with your family, then move out and for 4 years be on your own, essentially what that means for parents. I think that has created the lack of education in that space has created a disconnect between a lot of the young folks that grow up here and their parents. And I think that that's a void that we can definitely fill with proper education. Another thing, if I can take another minute, that I wanted to touch on is something that Chol mentioned earlier, which is that we need to do a better job of retaining the folks that are here. As someone who grew up here and went to elementary school, high school here, and then went away for college and came back, one of the saddest things is seeing a lot of my friends leave for better opportunities, or just opportunities in general for other states, not even just new Americans, but folks that have lived here for forever. That means, our doctors, that means our dentists, that means our therapists, our social workers, our janitors, everyone that we need. And that is the young folks that, as we all know, Vermont is an older state. So the next 20 years, the generation that's coming up really needs the support from the older generation to really figure out how to do a lot of these things. And as was mentioned in the introduction to the summit, it means really bringing our kids in and giving them the supports that they need, whether it's education about how to be civically engaged, or just education about where, how they can make the world a better place. So I just wanted to touch on that. Again, all the people that are leaving are essentially just the gold in our state is leaving. That's what it is. The people that are getting educated are seeing that there isn't much opportunity here and they're leaving. New Americans that are coming here, I've had a lot of families that have also left, a lot of family friends. And similarly, there are just better opportunities, or just opportunities in general in other spaces. So before we can even jump into bringing new people in, I want to see the people that are here prosper and stay. I'd like to someday have children here in the state of Vermont. And it seems like that hope is dwindling as we lose more and more people, and people that I've grown up with. So
thank you for that, Mohammed. Definitely sleepovers was a once in a lifetime thing for me. It was a huge deal. I can probably count how many sleepovers I've had in my childhood. Chol, I just want to go back to a point that you had made. It reminded me of a time, and Mohammed, you could probably jump in since we went to have the same alma mater, where international students, they have friendship families where they can connect with families in their local community to help them navigate the community, the school, any issues, someone who they can lean on as a family member while they're in the States, in that state. And you mentioned like having a program of a Vermont family hosting and welcoming a new American family as they come in. And part of the proposition VCRD has is developing a campaign or an intentional suite to have actions of welcoming and embracing Vermonters of color. That might be immigrants, refugee Vermonters, or BIPOC Vermonters coming in from other states as well. So I just wanted to lean into that conversation of what would a campaign look like, or intentional actions of messaging around welcoming and embracing Vermonters of color?
Thank you. That's one way to do it, right? That's one way to articulate that message for people that are already here, and for families that are more likely to come from other places, and for international students, right? I think if we do a good job of explaining, acknowledging the opportunities that families here receive, whether through education, at work, at the hospitals, or anywhere else, right? If we can articulate that message using the people themselves, it will go a long way. But we also have to be honest about some of the challenges that people might face. We have to be, so when you're selling a product, right, you have to do a good job of someone to really buy it for the first time. And if they bought that product, they should return. That's your goal. They should come back for the same product, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if we were ever to do that kind of outreach or engagement at the community level or a state level or a college level, we have to be honest about those opportunities that people will benefit from when they arrive here. And we also have to be honest about some of the challenges that they are likely to face here, right? Because if we do that, then people will really understand the choices that they have to make. If they do come here, they know what the challenges are. They know what the opportunities are, right? One of the things that people deal with when they come here is that, yes, indeed, by statistics, by numbers, our state is overwhelmingly white, right? And it's about 3% or close to 4% other, right? Now, if we do not explain those numbers, it will be a shock to someone when they arrive here. And we don't acknowledge those things in that kind of campaign, then we are not doing a good job. Mm-hmm. I think that's how I can really articulate that point.
Yeah, you bring up some great points on some of the challenges that we face with welcoming new Vermonters. And I think one of the challenges a lot of organizations, state departments face is retaining people of color, and doing recruitment for people of color across the state. Tino, did you want to talk a little bit about that, especially with background from the professionals of color?
Sure, thank you. So actually, one of the reasons that I co-founded the Vermont Professionals of Color Network was I had that feeling of isolation, of, am I the only professional around here? Because you don't, like Cho say, it's a 4 or 5% population of Black professionals, and then you talk about BIPOC professionals. So basically, the Vermont Professionals of Color Network was founded as a network for Black and Brown professionals and businesses who are looking for a voice, for acceptance, for validation, representation, support, recognition, growth opportunities, you name it, basically a safe space to be amongst other professionals like themselves. And it really didn't matter whether, or it doesn't matter whether you're, excuse the word, a white collar professional or a blue collar professional, whether you work in a bank or you run an appliance business, or whether you specialize in a food truck restaurant, or you work as a mechanic. Really, what really matters is that we see each other as being successful, and that we support each other's success and create paths and break down barriers and glass ceilings for each other. And that in turn then breaks down other barriers and creates more paths for the next generation of professionals and entrepreneurs of color. And that makes that journey more walkable for them. And so really, when I look at Vermont, yeah, sure, it's cold, the winters are brutal, but it is really amongst one of the best places to live. And despite all the positive things, that sense of inadequate racial and cultural representation makes it a challenge for people of color to want to stay here and want to be successful here and to think that they actually have a voice. And so I think part of the goal of forming the Vermont Professionals of Color Network is to build those opportunities and build those lasting bridges for BIPOC professionals and businesses to connect and to thrive and to be successful within Vermont. Because ultimately our tagline, which I've sort of insisted on us having, is a rising tide lifts all boats. Because a successful Black and Brown person means a successful Vermont. Whether I look at that as a person of color myself, seeing another person of color being successful, or as a taxpayer who I don't care about race when I'm paying taxes, I'm just paying taxes. If there are less people that we're having to support and more people being successful, making more money and being in a better spot for themselves, that's a good thing for me as a taxpayer, no matter who that person is. So ultimately, what we're trying to do as the Vermont Professionals of Color Network is we hold that power to advance the prosperity of all people of color in Vermont. And by creating opportunities and nurturing this powerful Black and Brown professional network. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to create a new era of economic and professional development for BIPOC individuals in the state. And then hopefully as a result, they stay longer, and then you start to see the benefits across the entire state.
That's an excellent, so many excellent points, Tino, on how, welcoming Vermonters and BIPOC Vermonters to Vermont, but how can we retain them? And you touched on so many other points of like advancing professional development and inclusivity in workplaces. Mohammed, do you want to chat a little bit about retention and recruitment for welcoming Vermonters and BIPOC Vermonters?
Yeah, especially when looking at the context of the last 5 years and with previous administration, there's probably a little bit of a scare for potential new Americans that would be coming to Vermont. I think in general in the US, but Vermont as well, seeing as Vermont is the second whitest state, there is a little bit of fear of immigrants not being wanted and newcomers not necessarily being welcome. So as Chol, I think, was alluding to earlier, there is a little bit of an onus on us and responsibility to kind of make sure that we continue to not only by words say that Vermont is welcoming, but be welcoming. And I think we as folks who are still part of Vermont, even in incredibly white Vermont, I think we have a role in making it welcoming for new Americans. So that I think that's what we should kind of try to lean towards, as well as saying, yeah, the previous administration and the way things were, and it's not like things are much better, 100 times better, right? It's things aren't necessarily any better. There are still a lot of things that are awful that is going on that I think we can discuss, but still somehow managing to find the energy to say we are still trying to be welcoming as we possibly can be. There's always work to do in everything, but you got to try. I don't know if that answered the question.
So I can just I think Mohammed put it right correctly. If I can put it differently, you know, when we're talking about retention or recruitment, right? What are we actually talking about, and from what level are we talking about, right? So there's one is residential, right? Residential recruitment, right? Can people actually live as far away from Burlington, right? The center of where you can see all people from all over. You're more likely to see them in Burlington than in other part of the state, right? That's one aspect of recruitment and retention. Can people actually feel comfortable to leave far away from Burlington, right? The other level is workplace, right? You know, there's a lot of talk these days about, you know, diversity need to be a priority. We need to hire more people of color. We have to do all those kind of things, right? For me, I see a lot of struggle all the time, either at the job, you know, a company level or organization level. We do a good job of maybe recruiting a person, an employee, but then we don't do a good job of actually retaining that employee, right? If we cannot retain the person, the only person that probably you've hired for that company, then there are a couple of problems, right? Is it more welcoming actually to work in that company, right? Does that company actually have a guaranteed sense of belonging, right? And how do you measure those welcoming aspect and sense of belonging at that space within the company, right? If you are measuring them by checking the box that, yes, last year we hired somebody, right? If that person worked for maybe 2 years, right? 2 years is a long time, but does it really tell the story about your working place, right? So for me, there are a number of things that a company can do. One, tell your story through your employees. Employees of color, if you have them, right? If employees of color cannot tell your story, then chances are you will struggle for a very long time to hire or retain people after those employees. That's one. Now, how do we address that problem? Is we address that problem through the Vermont Professional of Color Network, because it's creating a pool that is creating a space where forums are happening. People are sharing stories, successful stories, challenging stories, and they are being shared in a way that broaden the understanding of the workspaces in this state, right? Now, I see opportunity there. It's one place where actually, if a state can actually invest in that organization, I see an opportunity where a state can work with the Vermont, the New American Advisory Council, right? And use them as a tool for the state, a tool for the companies to actually recruit from, right? Because the people that are going to be hired from those spaces, they went through a special maybe training through the Vermont Professional of Color and through VNAC, the New American Advisory Council, on how to navigate workspaces, right? If we cannot have a comprehensive understanding and transparent process through that broad narrative, then recruitment and retention become very challenging. But it should not be challenging. Just use the people you have, empower them, create a pathways for them to succeed in your company. And you are telling your own story of your company and your employees. If you cannot do that, you're not telling your story. And so we can talk about hiring again and again and again and again, but we have to really succeed and do a good job of telling our stories through the people you have in your own space.
You're absolutely right, Chol. And just to add to a point to that is, we've seen over the past year or two, especially in the past year as of yesterday, a lot of national companies, a lot of Vermont organizations and local companies in Vermont creating diversity statements for their employees and looking to recruit either employees of color or new American employees, and how they can change the culture in their workplace to be more inclusive to even LGBTQ individuals, and how they can work or train their employees to see in that equity lens and have bias training and DEI training, diversity, equity, and inclusion training, as I would say. So I've definitely seen a shift in the past year in Vermont, and there's still a long way to go, definitely. It doesn't stop in training. There's goals that need to be made, that need to be achieved, and just to touch on that, actually, a good segment is we have a question from the audience here that I'm going to try and answer live. This question is there a community in Vermont that is doing a great job of welcoming new Vermonters that other communities could use as a model? I have some feedback, but I'll let you all answer first.
Yeah, I want to go first, and I'm really happy to speak on this. It's a very good question, but I want to look at it. It sounds simple, but it's a really very good question. So to say that there is not such a, Vermont has been so welcoming, let me say, put that way. We've saw a lot of support when things were very tough. Many communities trying to jump in and help here and there, you know, supporting new Americans, refugees, and everybody. So when you look at communities, I know people may think maybe Chittenden County is doing very well. It's more diverse. It's there is a lot of new Americans and people of color, but I think we have to dig deeper and look at why do we have people in Chittenden County. I think if we try to look at the real picture, it's because the process of welcoming people, starting from a reception of refugees, is because we try to make sure that people get the services they need in a more accessible way. So transportation is available, schools are very accessible, so healthcare accessible, right? But see, if there is a way that transportation is accessible, for example, in places like, why not other communities outside the Chittenden County that really have resources enough to welcome people, I think that's what's lacking. I mean, we do that, but again, we have to realize that we don't have enough resources, that the state could actually invest in more of that so that we can create more diversity in those other counties. I'm looking for example, Addison County or Franklin County. There are big towns, beautiful towns there, and where life can be even more affordable, housing-wise, childcare. We look at healthcare. Things are available, but the problem is, how can people get there? When somebody comes here first, they don't have transportation. They rely on public transportation. And Chol mentioned about a wonderful program that even the state can foster when we say kind of family friends that really receive somebody for an extended time, help them acclimate to the environment, to the new culture. I think what I want to say is that the most important thing to look at is not whether there is a community that has done it very well. I think it's resources that are available so that other communities can do the same job that, for example, communities in the Chittenden counties are doing. So that's my take on that, and thank you for that question. I want to appreciate for that, you know, the audience to ask that. That's a really good question.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great question. And also agree with Noel that there isn't really a test case that you can take and say this community has done well, because yeah, also there's just differences in how different communities are doing things, and doesn't necessarily make it the right way or the wrong way. One of the things though that I feel is a bit of a challenge is the fact that I do think that there is a lot of support for what I'd call, quote unquote, new Americans in the traditional sense, where they are actually quite brand new. I think, and one of the sort of, I'd say, secondary reasons why the Vermont Professionals of Color Network was formed was because there's a gap between when you are now here and you've been working and you've been around for maybe 5-10 years, whatever. How do you now get to the next level where you've lost that whole support unit? I mean, after you've been here for that many years, 5-10 years, you no longer have, the need for maybe perhaps the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program. You maybe no longer need to utilize AALV, and you're making a fairly good living. But how do you now get from making a fairly good living to making a really good living? And so I think we're missing that sort of bridge that connects that to being a successful citizen. And successful, I mean, in terms of economic prosperity as well as financial prosperity in Vermont, so that you're no longer reliant on all these services that are out there. And so you see this not just in sort of individual lives, but you also see that in businesses. I don't know how many people are on the panel know of businesses that are owned by BIPOC individuals. A lot of them are mom and pop establishments, and they are in the same sort of trap that we have found ourselves in, where you've gotten to a certain point where you're making good, decent money. You no longer need those services, but you still cannot get those government contracts. You still cannot get that big contract. You still cannot get from being a mom and pop shop that employs yourself, your wife, and maybe your 2 kids, to having, a staff of 5, 6, 7 people. How do we now bridge that gap? And that's where, for me, I feel like there is a lot that can be done by not just the public sector, but also the private sector. I think of, say, women, for instance. There was a time when there was a focus on, we need to make sure that women get included in all aspects of life. So you end up with maybe, say, the Vermont Women's Business Network and the Vermont Commission on Women. And that focus on getting women into these, out of sort of that, women stay at home, women don't have a lot of responsibilities. So like, let's get them out. They're just as capable of men. That focus led to women becoming like 50-50 partners in the success of the state. Same thing with the LGBTQ movement, for instance. There was focus on, let's focus on the rights and the upkeep of the LGBT community. You start to get organizations like Outright Vermont forming, etc. The same sort of thing needs to happen for the BIPOC community as well, where the government and the state and local governments, the private sector, really start to put their money where their mouth is and say, if BIPOC people are getting discriminated against in the same way that women were, in the same way that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters were, we now need to also do the same thing for BIPOC individuals. And that then allows that movement from the mom and pops to being a successful company, from me being a entry-level position clerk in a bank to being the mortgage originator, whatever that transition looks like.
If I could just jump in, I actually, in a lot of ways, I agree with Noel and Tino, but I also disagree. I actually think that all the communities that currently exist have done an excellent job of welcoming new Americans. And I think, like, for the Somali community, for instance, I can speak for the Somali community. Oftentimes when people come here, they are relying on the Somali community to figure out what they need to do. So what I would encourage the state is to really invest in these communities, whether it's through business. Again, if most people are going to come to someone like me, if they're Somali or New American, to ask about how a business is operated. And so really, really investing in these communities and supporting them in these things is going to, I think, help in a lot of ways. And not to say that I completely disagreed with you guys. Of course, I agreed with you on a lot, but I really do think that these communities do an excellent job of being there for one another and also just holding one another accountable. So that's my ask from the state of Vermont, is to support those communities.
Thank you, Mohammed, Tina, Noel, for a lot of great input on that. I'm gonna shift to another question from the audience that I think is a good segue as well. One member had asked, about 5 years ago, Rutland was set to welcome Syrian refugees, but the backlash was terrible. I believe this backlash was a mistake. How do Vermonters prevent this situation repeating itself?
If I may jump in quickly here, I think education is very important, and people accepting others, having a big heart to understand where people come from and put themselves in the other people's shoes, because it's so hard for you to really understand somebody if you didn't take time to really reflect and just, get to know your neighbor. I think that's the most important thing. And talking about Rutland, yes, there was a portion of people, I would say a number of people who were really against that process, but there was also a large number of people who really supported resettlement. And I just also want to say that Rutland is one of the communities that really suffered in terms of, losing professionals and, like the population decreasing, and refugees and being resettled in Rutland could have solved a lot of matters like that, because our populations, usually when they come in, they are ready to go to work. They are really inspired by the fact that they have been out of work for a long time. They have been homeless for a long time. Now is the time for them to rebuild their lives. So Rutland is a very good case scenario, but the thing is, it didn't stopped because of, that number of people were against. I think stopped because of the administration slashing and, putting in place policies that really limited the number of people from Muslim countries to enter the country. So that operation stopped it like that. But the thing is, we need many communities to at least be active, learn about the neighbors, learn about the people who are coming in. But I know that many others are doing really a good job to do that. And again, if I come to my first comment about what community is doing better and which one is not, I think all communities have been trying to do the best they can. But the thing is, Chittenden County has an explosive population of New American, especially people of color, because of course of the proximities of, services that are provided. They are so there, they are so accessible, and especially transportation. So yes, thank you so much for the question. And that was my take on that. Thank you.
I just also want to add to that, how can Vermonters prevent situation from repeating itself on the backlash in Rutland for the Syrian refugees? And there's a lot of big ways, there's a lot of small ways that do matter. For example, having inclusivity in grocery stores, because there's a lot of culture in food, for example. And sometimes that's what makes people feel at home the most, is food. Having open spaces for worship, open community spaces that they may feel free to be themselves, to express their culture in. having areas where, Chol, you had mentioned, where people can help them navigate systems in the community so they don't feel that they have to navigate it on their own, or it's not all on USCRI or AALV, where it's up to the community members to also take that responsibility and help their neighbors as well. There's so many ways that people can pitch in. I often hear people say, well, they don't know what their role can be in helping new Vermonters, but it's as simple as just being a neighbor and being a friend and offering something that looks familiar and comforting to someone who is new to Vermont as well. So I also have a question from the audience here, and it reads, many immigrants come with high skills from professional careers, but are unable to plug into our economy at the level they are truly at. What are the main barriers, and how might communities, the state, and people use to get paid for their skills? So I think I'm going to put the question in the chat here for you all. I think to this question, it has a lot to do with education and realizing, as all of us here on this panel understand, people do come from a background in their home country. They're either midwives or doctors or electrician, engineers. And Tino, you mentioned this early on in the session, that they're starting from zero, basically, and they're eager to get to work. As you've mentioned, Nicole, they're very eager to start helping their family, be a part of the community, and contribute to society. There's so many barriers on how my communities help, but what do you think could be addressed and is feasible for a lot of new Vermonters, whether coming in from other states or coming in from other countries directly into Vermont? What are some of the things that you think could be addressed here?
I think the state of Vermont could implement some uniformed way for people to get their certification and be certified. Like you said, regardless whether you're speaking Swahili, Japanese, or Somali, you're an engineer is an engineer, regardless whatever language you learn to become an engineer. And I think if the state of Vermont can come up with a uniformed way to allow people to demonstrate their ability to do some of these things, I think it would make it a lot easier. It is just a language barrier, but again, language is not a prerequisite to becoming a doctor or I mean, the language in which you would be becoming, yes. So I think that's really what the state of Vermont can do, is really try to come up with some sort of structure that allows people to just test and demonstrate their skills. And I think it should be uniformed, and I think it should be accessible, and it should take into account the different languages that people speak and the different cultural differences also that can really become barriers on any sort of test that might be administered. That's my take.
100% agree with you, Mo, despite the fact that you slightly disagreed with me on the previous thing. So I'll just be completely honest and say there's nothing worse than knowing that you are smart enough to do something, but because of your accent or because of your lack of language skills, being viewed as something less worthy. And that's the experience I had when I first came to the United States. I had my university degree, but ended up spending the first several years of my life here in the US kind of working basic entry-level positions, just because, one, I had an accent at the time, which I have. In fact, one of the things that I did most, which I regret, was work hard at getting rid of my accent, because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to not sound like I did. And so I think one of the things that we need to do, like Mo was saying, is ensure that if you have skills as you're coming in as an immigrant, that the state recognizes that and tries to do whatever it can to get you into that skill, into that trade or industry upon your arrival into Vermont. Because, you know, yeah, it doesn't matter whether you learned how to be an electrician in Japanese or in in French or in whatever other language, it's still basically the fundamentals are still the same. And now all you have to do is just get over the language barrier. So 100% agree that it would be great if the state does, as it's bringing in new immigrants, look at what certifications or professions these people have had in their previous lives, and then try to make sure that those are transferred in, because otherwise the end result is, yes, you are packing groceries at Price Chopper, or you're working at a deli or somewhere because nobody else will take you in. And that is not the right place to start somebody who is smart enough, because then they have to start working their way back up. And by the time they have done that, again, back to the question of, can Vermont sustain, this kind of low population growth rate? It cannot. And so if we're bringing in people that are then going to start at the bottom, those people have to be supported. And yet those people are smart enough to be brought in at a different level.
I'd also like to add that sometimes it's not even necessarily a language barrier. It could be simply an inability to present the paperwork that is needed, which is even far more heartbreaking than, a language barrier. So I think it's really, really important to pay attention to that.
Noel, did you want to add to that? Oh, sorry, Chol.
Yes, so at one point, I heard from other places that sometimes it's very easy. It sounded very easy, but there are some laws. There are some laws that are involved that make it so hard, right? Make it so complicated. Say, for example, someone who is a teacher, right? And, he got this degree and he's going to college again. And he said, well, I went to college. This is the degree I have. And this particular person is going to be sent to another place that can try to look at some description about the program you did. My goodness, the process itself is so defeating, right? You just say, well, you know what, I am just going to start over, right? But I do believe that some credentials, like being a dentist, right? Credential like being an engineer, credential like being a mechanic, right? Those are the things that a state can create some training program that does not take for maybe 2 more years or 3 years, maybe 1 year, and have someone who is a professional, a licensed person, work with this particular person pretty much on the job, right? Attaining training, but on the job, doing the work with that person. I think that's something that can be done, right? An artist can draw a picture, my face, the way my face is, right? But if they come to the United States and say, these are my credentials, I am an artist, I can prove I can draw something. I can create a story, I can create a narrative, I can do anything because I've learned this. But the paper does not say the United States, then that's the end. That's the dead end right there, right? So is there any other place that is better than this state that can do this? I'm sure there is, but I really believe our state can really do this kind of work, can empower these people with this incredible high skills. If we can train this person in a year to actually do the work, that's one way to retain them to stay here, right? Because if they have to leave to another state, then they have to do their credentialings and things like that. So why can we not? But I think one of the challenges with that is that the number of people that are coming to the state is very small, right? It's very limited. And so chances are someone will come with that kind of skill sometimes is very low, right? But that doesn't mean that we should not have a program just in case someone comes with a need like that. So it's an opportunity for our state, and I think we can do it. I correct me, Mohammed, I think there was some talk about this process to make it easier. There's some legal work involved, but I think our state is in better shape to to make this happen.
So, Chol, I'm going to jump in real quick and say, well, even though the numbers are small of people coming to the state, if the state was to put that effort into getting people, into getting programs that can make it easier, doesn't that give Vermont the competitive advantage of being a state where if you are a dentist in Libya and you come over to the US, Vermont has got an easy way to get you in? That solves your immigration problem right there, or at least making people want to come to Vermont.
You're right on, and I agree. It should not give the impression that there's no need for it, right? And that's what I said. Despite the number of people coming in that may not have the skill that we may need, or high skill that we may need, we should have programs just in case someone come with the need, that meet the need for this kind of program. Correct me, because I know we're almost running out of time, but we definitely need to say a little bit more about language barrier. The cause of language barrier is something that I think fit in this forum. And I just wish that we have some time to talk a little bit about it. I know there are other questions that we might, but it's something that we might want to share some, what are the challenges around that, and what's some of the work that really need to be done around that.
Thank you. This conversation is amazing. I don't want it to end. There's so many great ideas and so many great strategies that are coming out from welcoming new Vermonters, and from education, from community work, a lot that the state could probably do to retain and recruit people of color and new immigrants as well. And you're right, Chol, you know, if a lot of the westernized countries can have education systems, and people come to the States and they use these credentials, or they just take a test and they're working alongside those people who already, you know, went to school here, then there should be some kind of process that does not make you start from the bottom for your profession, because that's just discouraging. Even me that did a graduate program at UVM, it wasn't all that simple. So you can only imagine for somebody who is starting from the way bottom and navigating this system, that's a lot of barriers to manage. But I do want to just wrap up really quickly with this thought. I'm sorry if we were not able to get to all of the question and answers from the audience. They're great questions. But I just wanted to ask some of you, what do you think would be the best outcome? What would it look like for welcoming new Vermonters? Any strategies, any outcomes that you think would make a difference? Is there like a #1 way that you would have to pick, that you would say this would make a difference in welcoming new Vermonters? Immigrant Vermonters, new Americans, BIPOC Vermonters from other states. Are there any key strategies that you would like to share?
Go ahead, Tino.
I was just going to put in a plug for the Vermont Professionals of Color Network. That's basically a network that exists to accommodate and to encourage and to support and to raise the profile of professionals of color. And so as soon as you get into the country, you've got a network of people, into the state, you've got a network of people that are there to support you and to make you feel welcome.
I second Tino's point here. I think really having institutions look towards some of these organizations that already exist. Tino's, you know, the VNAC, ALV, all these organizations that already really work with these communities is really important, and allowing them to lead on a lot of these discussions, similar to here, I think is very important. And then the second piece that I didn't come to until about 5 minutes ago is this idea of actually getting this certification that makes it simple for people who are, because imagine the amount of people that are in various states that would actually move, like Tino said, that would move to the state of Vermont because it is easier for them to prove their, you know, their doctor, whatever it may be. And there are a lot of people that are coming here, you know, that have fled war, that have fled civil strife, and haven't had the opportunity to gather all the papers that they need to prove that they are the engineers, that they are teachers. And I know a lot of people that are stuck in that boat. So that's the second thing for me. And I really think that that would address a lot of the retention problems. I really think that on an immigration level as well, it would be an appealing place to come when you know that the state of Vermont has taken the active steps to ensure that there is a way for you to give back to your community. And in return, I think that we'll have a lot more people that are able to give and pay taxes and be a part of the actual fabric of the state of Vermont. Right now, it does seem like new Americans are a bubble, and then there's the state of Vermont. And I think it's really, really important for that bubble to pop and for us to be a part of. And I say for us, even myself, who I've been here for forever, and I still feel like I am a part of that bubble more than I am a part of the state of Vermont. So.
Thank you.
I would
If I
like
could-
to second, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would like to second Mohammed. I think talking about the bubble, I think what do you think the best outcome would look like? I think more diversity, not only in this area, but everywhere, you know, get an experience of someone else from a different culture, learn about them, you know. But I think the state should think about policies that encourage affordability. I mean, investing in housing, for example. I think we know that number one challenge that people are facing right now is housing costs are rising crazy right now. I'm sorry to use the word. So I think if that is, that the state took an approach to reduce the cost, at least, you know, creating more affordable housing around the state, and also, you know, getting transportation. I think people can get everywhere if there is transportation enough to help people get around. And also, I'm thinking about childcare. You know, we get single mothers, we get parents who would like to really invest their time in working and earning for the family, paying taxes. But again, how can they do that if there is no enough childcare and also accessible childcare and affordable childcare? I think those are things that the state should think about, policies that can be put in place to really support that effort. And the last thing that I would like to say is that, well, communities have been doing great in terms of, you know, around where we are, let's say in this county. But again, there is a lot to be done. Definitely, there is a lot to be done. And I think the first effort to be done by the state. The state should be the first to invest in the process to bring more people and all to create more diverse communities.
Thank you for that. Well, I would like to, I know, Chol, you have a lot of great insight and wisdom to share as well. A lot of the contact information for our panelists can be found from either the website, they're involved in the community. You're welcome to find them amongst the community. But I'd like to thank Vermont Council on Rural Development for hosting us, and our wonderful panelists, Noel, Chol, Mohammed, and Tino Tenda. Thank you so much for being here and contributing to this conversation. So thank you all for the attendees, for your questions, and for participating today. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Great job,
so
Beth. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.